I don't know what happened. My stinking video cut off. This computer's so touchy. But she worked in a small appliance repair um, business, and she was raised in a polygamist group. Well, of course, I didn't know any of this, and when I first met her, several years after the fact, you know, I had happened chance to read a book, and for the life of me, I can't remember. It was under true crime listing in the bookstore. At that time, I'm an avid reader, but this particular book, for some reason, grabbed my interest, and it was about the polygamy thing, but it was about blood, what they call blood atonement. Now, I don't know if the these polygamous sects still do the blood atonement, but I think they do. But they more or less murder on the sly and bury the body, and you can never find the bones. I don't know how true it is now in this current day and time, but it was very much um, a part of their religion and their practice. Those that are from, that practice the old, Mormon religion. Now, back in the day when Brigham Young started all of this, they had several standards that they set in motion, and the one, of course, was the polygamy thing, and blood atonement was also another thing. And blood atonement was for what I guess that what they considered an unpardonable sin, or a sin that was so great that the only way that it could be remedied in the eyes of God was if you spilled your own blood. And then, of course, the polygamy thing was, you know, what they felt was part of the redemptive aspect of what they called having the priesthood. The men could not obtain what they called the priesthood unless they had more than one wife. And the more wives they had, I guess the higher degree of priesthood they would obtain in heaven. Enough said on that, because it can get mind-boggling. But anyway, I read this book, and I can't remember the name of it, and I did try to research it online, and the only topic, or the only title I could find was the 4 o'clock murders. And I really, in all honesty, it could have been that book, but I can't remember for sure. I just know that the father of, and I can't, I'm so distracted because the kids are here. He uh, had 2 of his sons, one of which was a twin, commit these blood atonement murders. And one of the murders that happened was the twin killed his twin and his wife, and there was a child involved, all under the religious scenario of blood atonement. And evidently other people died that particular day under the blood atonement thing. Well, the father, who was the spearhead and the one who initiated all of this and had his 2 sons go out and commit these crimes, of course ended up in prison, and he died in prison. I don't know about the 2 brothers. I guess they were in prison as well, but my memory eludes me because it was so long ago when I read the book, and I guess maybe I could force myself to read it again. But anyway, I just happened to read that book, and when I met my sister-in-law in person for the first time, she touched on the subject. We were both breastfeeding our babies, live babies, and I had invited her to go to a La Leche League meeting, which she had never been, but she'd had several children by then and was very much into breastfeeding and that type of thing, cloth diapers, the whole bit, which I was as well. I guess you could say we were like earth mothers. And she showed me some really cool ways to fold an old-fashioned cloth diaper, which I thought was really awesome. I mean, I learned from her. And I really, really loved her tremendously right off the top. And anyway, in our discussing things about my childhood and a little bit about her childhood, I found out she was raised in a polygamist environment. And I was like, wow. And of course, I found it to be very interesting. So, I asked her some questions about it, and I mentioned the book, and she was aware of the book, and she said that the man who spearheaded the murders was her biological father. I was like, wow. And the two men, one of which was the twin, those were her biological brothers. And the one, of course, that were murdered were also her brothers and niece and blah, blah, blah. So there were quite a few family members scattered here and there that had actually left the faith, that went into hiding. And she and my brother, even though they lived, a semi-normal life, they didn't live out in the rural areas or, anything crazy like that. They lived in normal neighborhoods like anybody else, but they were reclusive. They didn't divulge a lot of personal information unless they absolutely had to. Doctors' offices and certain places like that, they had no choice. But as a whole, she was very concerned about going to a La Leche League meeting and signing in. She actually was not going to sign in her name, and I think she finally did, but I'm not sure if she used her real name or not, because they were very much in jeopardy of losing their lives. Um, because of the blood atonement thing. They went kind of into hiding within society. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And she also told me she loves children, and she loves, now she's grandmother, but she's the sweetest girl on this earth. But she remembers sitting down on the floor with a bunch of babies around her and spoon feeding all these babies. And I asked her, I said, and of course they were limited on their income was very limited, because she explained to me, like, the first wife was better off, and then the second wife and third and fourth, and by the time it got down to the ninth or 10th wife, financially about 98% of the women were all on social aid. And of course they lived different levels of income levels, because the more wives you had, the ninth wife didn't live half as well as the first wife, so to speak, if y'all understand what I mean. Like, the first wife, was got all the perks, and then it just went right on down the line. And she said, they weren't very well off, and they lived off the system just like most of the other wives did. But I asked her, I said, when you left the religion, or you left the colony or the community or whatever you want to call it, I said, did you feel sad because you no longer had, you know, um, interaction with your mother, your biological mother? Did you feel like, you were losing your mother? And she said, not really, because she said, I had many mothers. It wasn't just my biological mother that raised me or was in my life. I had several mothers. So it wasn't like I was walking away from my mother, so to speak, where I would lose that relationship. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so crazy. But as the years went by, she, became more confident and less, they both felt less at risk. And of course, my brother as a whole is kind of a quiet sort of guy, and anyway, but they just weren't very, they were very reclusive. They weren't people that had, company come over for dinner and things. She homeschooled the children, all the kids, and lived a very happy, very productive life. Had lots of kids. I think they had like 9 or 10 kids, but it wasn't for religious purposes that she had all these kids. Beautiful family, and like I said, most of them are grown and married, and on it goes. So that was my very first, introduction. And also she shared with me, my mother used to help occasionally harbor runaways um, from the sect or from the religions, the polygamy people that she had come from. Now, going back to when she worked though at the small appliance, they were taught that the Gentiles were evil and worldly, and you couldn't trust them, and on it goes. Well, she was 16 when she met my brother. She fell in love with my brother, and they ran away. And of course, got married, started their family, and it went from there. So she proselyted, I guess you could say, from the faith, so to speak. And she had told my mother, she warned my mother, you need to be careful, Lorraine, because if, you put your life in jeopardy when you do these things, when you help harbor these runaways from this religious sect. And my mother, I'm not saying she was constantly doing this or constantly involved with this, but she did do it a few times. She did help some girls that were runaways. So, anyway, so there was my initial experience with the polygamous thing. Well, later, when my other brother got married, he married a young lady whose family was in the modern day Latter-day Saints. They didn't practice polygamy, but it's funny because they belie their own religion. Really, if they look at their historical records, Joseph Smith made it clear that if they did not practice polygamy, that the men could not reach the statehood or the state of obtaining what they called the priesthood. But the latter days stopped, practicing polygamy to blend in with society so they wouldn't create waves, following the laws of the land and that type of thing. And, there was a time when Mormons, latter days, as well as the older, did not allow people of color in their religion. It wasn't until not too long ago that they actually allowed people of color because they were considered marked in some kind of way, representing evil. And you can research that as well, which is not a good thing either. So there are a lot of factors involved, But when my brother married this young lady whose family was modern day saints, as they called them, Mormon, I don't know what they call them, modern day, latter day, whatever, but they're modern practicing Mormons like Donnie and Marie Osmond. I was very much in church, and I decided I was going to research this stuff a little bit more. And plus, we had tons of Mormon missionaries knocking on our door, always wanting to come in and, chat with us and stuff. And so I purchased a book that I highly recommend called The Maze of Mormonism by Dr. Walter Martin. That book I read inside out, upside down. I mean, that book was so dog-eared and so marked up because I just couldn't get enough of the historical information that was shared in this book about the modern day saints. But it also was a historical reference that went back to Joseph Smith and the very beginning of this religion. And Dr. Walter Martin, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he was actually related to Joseph Smith. So I just tore that book up for the sake of wanting to know more about the Mormon religion, especially since, because see, when my older brother married the one that was in the polygamist, they didn't practice Mormonism. They were Christians. They went to a Christian church. So I didn't show much interest in the history of Mormonism because I felt, okay, he's not involved in this. But when my other brother decided to, actually, he's a Sunday school teacher in the Mormon church, I was just like, okay, I got to find out more about this religion. So I read this book. Oh boy, I never debated the issue with him because he lived in an entirely different state. I didn't get to see my family that often. But I was very informed, and there were numerous times that I would have missionaries come into my home and I would talk to them. And it wasn't a debate as to who would win the war, but it was an actual sincere effort to try to get them to question and to do their own research on some of these things. One of which was the plural marriage thing, that they were going against their own religious founder when it came to not practicing polygamy. So, and then not too long ago, I read another book about the Mormon religion, but it's a very easy read, and it's called The Sound of Gravel. I couldn't put that book down. That is just basically the life of a young girl who had her experience growing up with a woman who was one of many wives. Now I don't think she at that point was forced in any kind of, minor marriage thing, but it just talks about her life and her mother and the hardships that they went through and the indecisiveness that her mother had when it came to this particular religion, and how that her mother was involved, but yet she wasn't involved at some point in time, and then she got involved again, and it's a really heart-wrenching story. And it's called The Sound of Gravel. And my sister-in-law's cousin wrote a book. I thought it was called The Prophet's Daughter. I do know on the cover there's a picture of a little girl with blonde hair, and there's a strip of like paper going across her. It's like a photo of a little girl with blonde hair, and it looks like somebody ripped her face out of the photo. Hold on, Jordan, someone's at the door.
I'm out here.
And that's what the cover looks like.
I need more stuff.
But I have not had a chance to read the book, but it goes into her story. I think it's called The Prophet's Daughter. There are several other books out there with that title, but this is a recent publication, and the girl that wrote this book is the cousin of my sister-in-law. So I do have, a little bit of connections with this Mormon plural marriage thing. But I did want to point out this, and I'm going to close. It's not just these minor girls that are having issues with, underage, if you can call it marriage. Yes, consenting adults, like the sister wives, okay? But keep in mind something that a lot of people that have given their opinion on this polygamy thing with Bountiful Baby, you got to keep in mind something as well. It's not just these minor girls and boys that are suffering through this situation. There are a lot of women, wives, adults that are also abused in these situations. So it's a vicious cycle or a vicious circle. There's a continuum. The minor marriage thing, the young boys, but also the women, those of age, women, that are, in these polygamous situations that start questioning maybe the way they're being treated, or maybe they question their religion, or they're questioning certain things. They also suffer, and they get punished. They have to deal, with being exposed to the other wives, or being abused by the other wives. They're exposed to the hardships and the emotional factors involved, jealousies and feeling neglected, and and the Sister Wives, that show, brought out some of those things, but on a lighter level. The jealousy factor, this, that, and the other. I mean, it's just not a natural thing. And so keep in mind, it's more than just the young minor girls and boys that are being abused. Even the children are being abused, because if there's a lot of resentment and strife in the home, and a lot of issues going on in the home, even the little children and the babies even are affected by these things. So, but I just wanted to share my little story and a little bit about what I felt, that the possibilities that can um, come about as a result of the bountiful baby situation. What I feel like could happen with the reborn productions, the kickoff kits, the increase in sales with McPherson's, um, whether or not Bountiful Baby even really cares if they lose business or not. Maybe they feel like it doesn't matter to them because they get enough business regardless. Maybe there's a lot of women out there that may continue to support Bountiful Baby even though all these facts have been brought out. I don't know. But I'm going to try to post this video, and I hope that it is not got any glitches. And I really appreciate y'all letting me ramble on and on and on. Y'all have a nice weekend. Love you guys. Bye bye.